A struggling artist painted a dying tree, only to discover it hid a portal to a magical realm. Elias Reed knew this with absolute certainty as he stood transfixed before his canvas, paintbrush trembling in his paint-stained fingers. The impossible swirls of light emanating from what should have been ordinary bark weren't a figment of his imagination or a trick of the evening sun filtering through his studio's dusty windows. They were real, undeniably real. 3 weeks earlier, Elias had been nothing more than another failed artist in a city that collected broken dreams like parking tickets. His once promising career had withered as surely as the ancient oak he now obsessively painted and repainted. At 34, his gallery showings had dwindled from prestigious downtown exhibitions to coffee shop walls, then to nothing at all. The stack of rejection letters in his desk drawer grew taller as his bank account shrank to nearly nothing. The cramped studio apartment that doubled as his workspace smelled perpetually of turpentine and instant noodles. Canvases lined the walls, some finished, most abandoned, silent testimonies to his failing inspiration. The whispers of doubt that had once been barely audible now screamed in his ears each time he lifted a brush. "You're wasting your life," his father had said during their last phone call 6 months ago. "Art doesn't feed you, son. It doesn't pay the bills." Elias had hung up without responding. What could he say? The past due notices piling up beside his sink proved his father right. On a particularly bleak Tuesday in October, when the weight of failure pressed so heavily on his chest he could barely breathe, Elias had wandered aimlessly through Riverside Park. The autumn wind bit through his thin jacket, matching the coldness that had settled in his bones. He hadn't touched a brush in weeks. The very thought of painting made his stomach churn with anxiety and self-loathing. That's when he saw it, the dying oak. It stood apart from the other trees, twisted and gnarled, half its branches bare despite the season. The remaining leaves clung desperately to their branches, vibrant reds and golds defiant against the inevitable. Something about its solitary struggle against death called to him. Here was a being persisting despite everything, beautiful even in its decay. For the first time in months, Elias felt the familiar tingle in his fingertips, the need to capture something on canvas. He returned to the park the next day with his sketchbook, and the day after that. The tree became his obsession, the only thing that coaxed his dormant creativity back to life. He sketched it from every angle, at different times of day in varying light. He filled pages with studies of its bark, the intricate patterns of its few remaining leaves, the way its shadows fell across the grass. Back in his studio, he began to paint. The first attempts were frustrating failures. The canvases captured the tree's form, but missed its essence, that inexplicable quality that had drawn him to it. Each failed attempt only drove him to try again, staying up late into the night, forgetting to eat, ignoring the persistent knocking of his landlord demanding the overdue rent. And then on the 7th day, something changed. Elias mixed his paints as usual, but as he began applying pigment to canvas, his hands seemed guided by something beyond himself. He worked in a trance-like state, barely aware of time passing. The weak afternoon sunlight faded to darkness, but he didn't stop to turn on the lights. He painted by the silver glow of the moon, his movements fluid and certain. When dawn broke, Elias stepped back from the canvas, muscles aching from hours of standing, and gasped. The tree on his canvas wasn't simply a representation, it seemed to breathe. The texture of the bark appeared three-dimensional, with depths and hollows that shouldn't have been possible with paint alone. But strangest of all were the faint luminescent patterns running through the trunk like veins of light. "That's not what I painted," he whispered, rubbing his eyes. Yet when he looked again, the strange lights remained. Over the next few days, the phenomenon intensified. Each time he worked on the painting, the luminescent patterns grew stronger, more intricate. Sometimes, when the studio was very quiet, he thought he could hear whispers emanating from the canvas, soft voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand, but somehow recognized in his soul. He told no one about the painting. Who would believe him? Instead, he withdrew further from the few friends who still checked on him, ignoring their texts and calls. The painting demanded all of his attention, all of his energy. On the 15th day, as he worked deep into the night, his brush touched a particularly bright whorl in the trunk and passed through the canvas. Elias jerked back, heart hammering against his ribs. That was impossible. Yet when he cautiously extended his hand again, his fingers slipped through the painted surface as easily as breaking the tension of water. A warm breeze, incongruous with his chilly apartment, caressed his fingertips from the other side. "I'm losing my mind," he murmured, but he didn't pull away. Instead, almost against his will, he leaned forward until his face was inches from the canvas. The scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed earth replaced the familiar smell of paint and turpentine. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Come through," they seemed to say. "We've been waiting." With his heart thundering in his ears, Elias closed his eyes and stepped forward. The sensation was like passing through a curtain of warm water. For a brief, disorienting moment, he felt suspended between worlds, and then solid ground materialized beneath his feet. When he opened his eyes, the breath caught in his throat. He stood in a forest unlike any he had ever seen. The trees towered impossibly high, their trunks wider than his apartment. Their bark shimmered with the same luminescent patterns he had painted, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The canopy above was a tapestry of leaves and colors he had no names for. Beyond purple, beyond blue, beyond anything existing in his world. The air tasted sweet, like honey and citrus, and felt somehow more substantial in his lungs. At the center of a small clearing stood the oak from his painting, but transformed. No longer dying, it burst with vitality, its branches heavy with lushly colored leaves and strange glowing fruits. The patterns of light he had seen in his painting swirled across its bark in hypnotic configurations. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "You called to us," came a voice behind him. And we answered. Elias spun around to find a woman watching him. At least she appeared mostly woman-shaped, though her skin had the faint luminescence of the trees, and her hair moved like leaves in a breeze despite the still air. Her eyes, a color that shifted between green and gold and something else entirely, regarded him with curious intensity. "I don't understand," Elias said, his voice trembling. The woman tilted her head. "You saw the truth of the guardian tree when others saw only decay. You captured its essence when it was fading from your world. In doing so, you reopened a door long closed. Guardian tree? The anchor between worlds," she explained, gesturing to the great oak. "Once, there were many such passages between your realm and Lumeria. But as your people forgot magic, the connections withered. This guardian was the last, and it too was dying. Until I painted it," Elias said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. The woman nodded, a smile illuminating her face. "Until you saw it truly and gave it new life through your art. Magic responds to those who believe in it, those who can see beyond the surface of things." She extended her hand. "I am Naira, keeper of the Eastern Grove." Hesitantly, Elias took her hand. Her touch sent a pleasant tingling sensation up his arm, like the fizz of champagne in his veins. "I'm Elias," he said. I'm just an artist. A failing one, at that." Nira's laugh was like wind chimes. "There is no such thing as just an artist, Elias. Creators are the bridge between what is and what could be." She tugged gently at his hand. Come. There are others who wish to meet the one who saved the guardian." In a daze, Elias followed her deeper into the forest. The ground beneath his feet seemed to welcome each step, the soil springy and vibrant. Small creatures darted among the underbrush, some recognizable as rabbits or foxes, others utterly foreign with too many legs or iridescent fur that changed colors as they moved. They arrived at what first appeared to be another massive tree but revealed itself to be a dwelling built seamlessly within a living trunk. Inside, the space opened up impossibly wide with rooms and passages that defied the tree's external dimensions. Light filtered in through windows of what looked like living amber, casting everything in a golden glow. Gathered inside were beings of all descriptions, some nearly human but with subtle differences, others completely fantastic. A man with antlers growing from his brow conversed with a woman whose lower half was that of a deer. A child with butterfly wings played a game with floating orbs of light. And in the corner, a being composed entirely of what appeared to be living shadow observed everything with eyes like distant stars. Conversation stopped as Elias entered. All eyes turned to him, and he fought the urge to shrink back under their collective gaze. "The artist has arrived," Naira announced, and to Elias's astonishment, the gathered beings bowed their heads in respect. "I don't understand," he whispered to Naira. "Why are they treating me like I'm important?" An elderly figure approached, leaning on a staff made of twisted wood. Despite his apparent age, he moved with fluid grace. His skin was deeply lined like tree bark, and small mushrooms grew along his shoulders. "Because, young one," the elder said, his voice resonant as a hollow drum, "you have saved not just the Guardian, but potentially all of Lumeria." He touched Elias's chest with a gnarled finger. "And whether you know it yet or not, Lumeria may save you in return." The next several hours passed in a blur of introductions and explanations. Elias learned that Lumeria existed parallel to his own world, a realm where magic flowed as naturally as electricity did in his. The Guardians, special trees that anchored connections between worlds, had once been plentiful, allowing free passage between realms. But as humanity progressed technologically and lost its connection to magic, the Guardians withered one by one. The oak in Riverside Park was the last living guardian, and even it had been dying. When Elias painted it with true sight and feeling, he had unknowingly begun a healing process, strengthening the connection between worlds. But I'm nobody special. Elias protested as they sat around a table laden with strange fruits and beverages that tasted of summer sunshine and crisp autumn mornings. I couldn't even make a living with my art. The shadow being, who had introduced himself as Thorn, spoke in a voice like velvet darkness. Value in your world is not the same as worth in the universe, Elias Reed. Many who accumulate wealth and fame create nothing of true significance. But you, his star-like eyes fixed on Elias, you created with such truth and feeling that you breached the veil between worlds. As the evening progressed, Elias felt something long dormant within him stirring to life. These beings treated his artistic vision as valuable, even vital. They asked about his techniques, his inspirations, his creative process with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. For the first time in years, he spoke passionately about art without the undercurrent of shame that had become his constant companion. When the gathering finally dispersed, Nira showed him to a small chamber within the tree dwelling. Rest, she said. Tomorrow there is much more to show you. I should get back, Elias said, suddenly remembering his apartment, his unpaid rent, the real world that still waited beyond the canvas. People will wonder where I am. Nira smiled gently. Time moves differently here. When you return, little time will have passed in your world. She touched his arm. But Elias, you are welcome to stay as long as you wish. Lumeria has a way of healing those who enter its embrace. That night, Elias slept more deeply than he had in years, cradled in a bed that seemed to grow from the living wood of the tree. No anxieties plagued his dreams, no fears of failure or worthlessness. Instead, he dreamed of colors he had never seen, of landscapes waiting to be painted, of possibilities stretching endless before him. He woke to soft golden light filtering through the amber windows and the distant sound of singing, a melody so haunting and beautiful it brought tears to his eyes before he was fully conscious. Over the next days, or was it weeks, time truly did feel different here. Elias explored Lumeria with Nira as his guide. He witnessed wonders that defied description, floating islands cloaked in perpetual rainbows, forests where the trees danced at twilight, creatures that transformed from solid to light and back again. Everywhere they went, the residents of Lumeria greeted him with warmth and respect. Children, or beings that resembled children, would run up to touch his hands, giggling that they were covered in colors, even when he hadn't been painting. They can see your creative energy, Nira explained. To them, you glow with it. Elias began to carry a sketchbook with him, recording the marvels he witnessed. His fingers flew across the pages with a confidence and joy he had thought lost forever. When the Lumerians saw his drawings, they reacted with delight, often touching the pages as if they could feel the images coming to life. Gradually, Nira and the others explained more about Lumeria's current troubles. The weakening of the Guardian had affected the entire realm. Magic was diminishing in certain areas, causing parts of their world to fade or become unstable. While Elias's painting had strengthened the connection, the Guardian needed more help to fully recover and stabilize the passages between worlds. We believe your art is the key, the elder, whose name was Thistledown, told him during a council gathering. Your ability to see truth and capture essence could help restore the Guardian to its full power. But how? Elias asked. I'm just using ordinary paints from my world. It is not the materials that matter, said a water spirit named Cascade, her form shimmering like a vertical pool. It is the intention, the emotion, the connection you forge between vision and creation. Thorn nodded, shadow swirling. When you paint with true heart, you alter reality itself in small ways. All great art does this, but your connection to the Guardian has amplified this ability. The council proposed that Elias create a series of paintings, not just of the Guardian tree, but of the vital magical nexus points throughout Lumeria. Each painting would strengthen the corresponding location, gradually healing the realm's faltering magic. Will it work? Elias asked Nira later as they walked along a riverbank where the water flowed uphill as often as down. I don't know, she admitted. Nothing like this has been attempted before. But she stopped, turning to face him. In the weeks he had known her, Elias had found himself increasingly drawn to her otherworldly beauty, her wisdom, her quiet strength. I believe in you, Elias. I've seen what happens when you create. There's magic in it, real magic. The sincerity in her shifting color eyes made his heart constrict. How long had it been since anyone had believed in him so completely? Then I'll try, he said simply. The next morning, supplied with Lumerian materials, paints mixed from crushed gemstones and flower petals, brushes made from unknown materials that responded to his lightest touch, Elias began to paint. His first subject was a crystal grotto where magical energies converged in spectacular light displays. As he painted, he felt a strange resonance between his brushstrokes and the crystals themselves, as if each mark on canvas strengthened the actual place. When he completed the painting, the Lumerians brought it to the grotto. As they held it facing its real counterpart, the crystals flared with renewed brilliance, their light pulsing in exact synchronization with the painted image. It's working? Naira breathed, squeezing his hand. Over the following weeks, Elias painted location after location, the floating isles, the twilight marshes, the singing caverns. Each painting, when brought to its corresponding location, reinvigorated the magic there. The Lumerians celebrated each success, their gratitude overwhelming him. For perhaps the first time in his life, Elias felt his art truly mattered. But as he worked, a nagging worry grew within him. Eventually, he would need to return to his world. The thought, once merely anxiety-inducing, now felt like a physical pain. How could he go back to his cramped apartment, his struggling existence, after experiencing the wonder and acceptance of Lumeria? How could he leave Naira, whose presence had become as essential to him as breathing? One evening, as they sat on a cliff edge watching twin moons rise over a shimmering sea, Elias finally voiced his fears. I don't want to go back, he confessed quietly. There's nothing for me there except failure and loneliness. Naira was silent for a long moment, her luminescent skin glowing softly in the moonlight. You speak as if you must choose one world or the other, she said finally. Don't I? He picked up a stone, tossing it into the impossibly blue waters below. I don't belong here, I'm human. And I don't fit in there either. I've spent years proving that. Naira took his hand, her touch sending that now familiar tingling warmth up his arm. Perhaps you are meant to belong to both worlds, Elias. The Guardian connects them for a reason. She hesitated. There is something I haven't told you, something the Council has been discussing. Elias turned to her, suddenly alert. What is it? We believe that once all the Nexus points are strengthened, the Guardian Tree will be powerful enough to create additional passages. New Guardians could grow in your world, allowing more connections between our realms. Hope flared in Elias's chest. You mean, you could come and go freely, she confirmed. And perhaps others from your world could too. Those with the right perception, the right openness to magic. The possibility dizzied him, not having to choose, not having to abandon either world or Naira. But before this potential future could be realized, Elias had to complete his most challenging painting yet. The heart of Lumeria, a sacred grove at the center of the realm where all magical energies originated. According to Thistledown, this would be the final piece needed to fully stabilize the Guardian and potentially enable the creation of new passages. The heart was accessible only once a year, during an alignment of the twin moons. As that night approached, the entire realm buzzed with anticipation. Elias felt the weight of expectation pressing upon him. What if he failed? What if his talent wasn't equal to this final, most crucial task? The night before their journey to the heart, unable to sleep, Elias wandered through the luminescent forest. His thoughts churned with anxiety until he found himself at the base of the Guardian Tree, the oak that had started it all. In Lumeria, it stood magnificent and towering, its bark pulsing with vibrant light patterns. I'm afraid, he admitted aloud to the silent tree. Afraid I'll disappoint them. Afraid I'm not enough. The tree, of course, didn't answer. But as Elias placed his palm against its trunk, a sense of calm washed over him. This was the tree that had called to him when he was at his lowest. This was the being that had seen something in him when he could see nothing in himself. We're connected, aren't we? He whispered. Both of us caught between worlds. Both of us struggling to survive. Under his palm, the light patterns shifted, swirling around his fingers as if in response. Elias smiled, feeling a resolution form within him. Then we'll help each other, he promised. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll face it together. The next evening, a small group made the journey to the heart of Lumeria. Elias, Naira, Thistledown, Thorn, and several other council members. They traveled on the backs of great moth-like creatures whose wings spanned wider than Elias was tall. As they flew over the landscape, Elias marveled at the realms spread below them. From this height, he could see how the patterns of light connected everything: forests, mountains, rivers, settlements, in a vast, living network. The nexus points he had already painted glowed more brightly within this network, their energies restored and flowing freely once more. They landed at the edge of a perfect circle of ancient trees, their massive trunks curved inward to form a natural dome. At the center of this cathedral-like space stood a single sapling, no taller than Elias himself, but glowing so intensely that it hurt to look at directly. The heart, Naira whispered reverently, the first tree from which all magic in Lumeria flows. Elias set up his easel at the edge of the grove, watching as the Lumerians prepared for the lunar alignment. Thistledown and the others arranged themselves in a circle around the sapling, joining hands. When the moons aligned directly overhead, Thorn explained to Elias, the heart will open briefly, revealing its true essence. That is what you must capture. Elias nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. He arranged his paints, checked his brushes, and waited. As the twin moons rose higher, their light filtering through the living dome of trees, the air in the grove grew heavy with potential. Elias could feel it on his skin, in his lungs, behind his eyes. Magic gathering, condensing, preparing. The first moon slid gradually into position above the gap in the canopy. Its silver light spilled onto the sapling, which responded by growing visibly taller, its glow intensifying. The second larger moon followed more slowly, its golden radiance joining with the silver. When the moons perfectly aligned, their combined light struck the sapling like a physical force. The small tree seemed to absorb the moonlight, swelling with energy until suddenly it burst open like a flower blooming. Where the sapling had stood was now a pillar of pure light, twisting and spiraling upward. Within its translucent core, Elias could see what looked like the universe itself. Stars being born and dying, galaxies swirling, reality forming and reforming in endless cycles of creation. The sight stole his breath. How could he possibly capture this? It was beyond paint, beyond canvas, beyond human comprehension. And yet, Elias lifted his brush. As it touched the canvas, he felt that now familiar sense of connection, not just to his art, but to Lumeria itself. He let go of his doubt, his fear, his sense of human limitation. He surrendered to the moment, to the magic, to the impossible beauty before him. His hand moved with certainty, applying color and light in ways he had never attempted before. The painting took shape not as a literal representation of what he saw, but as the essence of it, the feeling of witnessing creation itself, the humbling wonder, the expansive love that seemed to emanate from the heart. Time lost all meaning. Elias painted as if in a trance, barely aware of his body or surroundings. Only the canvas existed, only the connection between his vision and his creation. When he finally laid down his brush, the moons had moved past their alignment. The heart had returned to its sapling form, though it glowed more vibrantly than before. The Lumerians in the circle were watching him with expressions of awe. Elias looked down at his painting and gasped. What he had created seemed alive, the colors shifting subtly as if breathing, the light within the painted heart pulsing with actual luminescence. It wasn't just a painting. It was a window, a mirror, a doorway all at once. It's done, he said, his voice hoarse. Nira approached, her eyes wide as she gazed at the canvas. Elias, she whispered, well, this is beyond anything we hoped for. Thistledown hobbled forward, leaning heavily on his staff. Bring it forward, he instructed. Let the heart see itself through your eyes. With trembling hands, Elias lifted the canvas and carried it to the sapling. As he held the painting before the glowing tree, the air between them seemed to thicken, to shimmer like heat rising from summer pavement. The sapling's glow extended outward, tendrils of light reaching for the painting. When they made contact with the canvas, a surge of energy pulsed outward in an expanding ring, knocking everyone in the grove to their knees. Elias clung to the painting, feeling it growing warm in his hands. The colors on the canvas began to flow like liquid, rearranging themselves, spreading beyond the edges of the frame. Light poured from the image, connecting to the sapling in a continuous circuit. Then, with a sound like a distant bell, the energy stabilized. The painting cooled in Elias's hands, the colors once again solid, though somehow deeper, richer than before. The sapling stood taller, its glow steady and strong. It is done, Thistledown said, his voice filled with wonder. The heart is healed, and with it all of Lumeria. As if in confirmation, the ground beneath them trembled gently. Throughout the grove, new saplings began to sprout, pushing up through the soil with impossible speed. New guardians, Nira breathed. They're forming already. Thorn's shadowy form rippled with excitement. The passages between worlds will be restored. Not just one, but many. Elias stood in stunned silence, watching the miracle unfold around him. He had done this. His art, his vision, his connection to this realm had made this possible. For the first time since he could remember, he felt not just useful, but necessary. Not just talented, but uniquely gifted with purpose. The journey back to the Lumerian settlement was jubilant. News of the heart's restoration spread rapidly throughout the realm. By the time they returned, celebrations were already underway. Music playing, lights dancing through the trees, Lumerians of all kinds gathering to share in the joy. In the days that followed, Elias witnessed the effects of his work throughout Lumeria. Colors grew more vibrant, magic flowed more freely, and the new guardian saplings continued to flourish. According to Thistledown, once these saplings matured, they would create new passages to Elias's world, anchored to trees there that resonated with Lumerian energy. "You will be able to come and go as you please," the elder assured him, "and guide others with the right perception to find their way here too." The thought filled Elias with both excitement and trepidation. Who in his world would he share this miracle with? Did he even have anyone left who would believe him? As the celebration of the heart's restoration continued into its third day, Elias found a quiet moment with Nira. They sat together on a high branch of an enormous tree, looking out over the twinkling lights of the settlement below. "I have to go back soon," he said quietly. "At least for a while. There are things I need to settle." Nira nodded, her expression serene, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. "I know. You have a life there that needs resolution. But I'll come back," he added quickly, taking her hand. "Nira, these weeks in Lumeria have changed me. I've found parts of myself here I thought were lost forever." He hesitated, then continued softly. "And I've found you." Her fingers tightened around his. "When you return to your world, take this with you." She slipped a ring from her finger, a band of what looked like living wood, with a small, constantly shifting light embedded within it. "It contains a spark from the heart itself. As long as you wear it, you'll never lose your connection to Lumeria, or to me." Elias took the ring, feeling its gentle warmth against his palm. "I'll never take it off," he promised. The next morning, Elias prepared for his return journey. The Lumerians gathered to bid him farewell, many bringing small gifts: a vial of liquid starlight, seeds from singing flowers, a cloak woven from whispers. "Remember," Thistledown told him as they stood before the guardian tree, "time passes differently between our worlds. Do what you must there, but do not linger too long." Elias nodded, then turned to Nira. Words seemed inadequate for this parting. Instead, he pulled her close, memorizing the feel of her in his arms, the scent of wildflowers in her hair, the gentle luminescence of her skin against his. "I'll be back before you know it," he whispered. "I'll be waiting," she replied, pressing something into his hand. "A small seed glowing with inner light. Plant this near where you live. It will grow into a guardian sapling, creating a direct passage between us." With one last look at the gathered Lumerians, beings who had become friends, mentors, a community that valued him, Elias stepped through the portal in the guardian tree. The transition back was disorienting. One moment he was surrounded by living light and magic. The next he stood in his cramped studio apartment, facing his painting of the oak. The canvas now shimmered subtly with actual light. The portal temporarily closed, but its magic evident to those who knew to look for it. Elias glanced at his phone, surprised to find that despite weeks in Lumeria, only 3 days had passed in his world. There were missed calls from his landlord, a few texts from acquaintances, but nothing urgent. The apartment felt smaller than he remembered, dingier, emptier. But as he looked around at his paintings, even the failed attempts, he saw them with new eyes. There was value here, truth here, even in the imperfections. His artistic journey had been preparing him all along for what he discovered in Lumeria. Over the next few weeks, Elias set about transforming his life with the same determination he had applied to healing Lumeria. He called the few galleries that had once shown interest in his work and arranged meetings. This time, when he spoke about his art, there was no undercurrent of doubt or shame, only passion and conviction. To his amazement, gallery owners responded to this new confidence. One agreed to feature 3 of his pieces in an upcoming exhibition. Another, after seeing his newest works, landscapes and beings inspired by Lumeria, though rendered just realistically enough to be believable, offered him a small solo show. "There's something different about your work now," the gallery owner said, studying a painting of what viewers would assume was an imaginary forest, but was actually a corner of Lumeria. It's like you found your voice. These pieces, they make people feel something. Something deep. Elias smiled, touching Nira's ring on his finger. I've been somewhere that changed my perspective, he said simply. He used his first sales to pay off his debts and secure his apartment for another year. In the small community garden behind his building, he planted Nira's seed, covering it with a glass cloche to protect it from the approaching winter. Each night, he worked on a new series of paintings, deliberate portals to different parts of Lumeria. These he kept private, understanding that the world wasn't ready to know about the realm yet. But someday, perhaps, he would find others with the perception to see the truth in his art, others who could benefit from Lumeria's magic as he had. As autumn deepened into winter, Elias found himself changing in other ways too. He reached out to old friends, rebuilding connections he had allowed to wither during his years of depression. He called his father, their conversation awkward but ultimately healing. He even began teaching a small art class at a community center, finding unexpected joy in helping others find their creative voice. Through it all, he wore Nira's ring, taking comfort in its gentle warmth against his skin. Sometimes when he was painting late into the night, he would sense her presence, a whisper of fragrance, a subtle change in the light, a feeling of being watched with loving eyes. The sapling in the garden grew with unnatural speed, reaching 3 feet tall by midwinter when it should have been dormant. Only Elias could see the faint luminescence that pulsed within its slender trunk. Finally, on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, Elias woke from a deep sleep with absolute certainty that it was time. He dressed warmly, packed a small bag with essentials, and included his most recent paintings and sketchbooks. In the pre-dawn darkness, he made his way to the community garden. Frost covered everything in lacy patterns, but the guardian sapling stood vibrant and green, its glow visible even to normal eyes on this special night. Elias approached it, heart pounding with anticipation. When he placed his hand against the slender trunk, he felt an immediate response. The living wood seemed to pulse beneath his fingers, the patterns of light swirling to meet his touch. "Take me back," he whispered. "Take me home." The bark beneath his palms softened, parted like a curtain. Through the opening, he could see a forest bathed in the light of twin moons, and standing there, waiting with outstretched hands, was Nira. Elias Reed stepped through the portal, leaving behind one world for another, or perhaps, more accurately, becoming a bridge between both. The struggling artist who had once painted a dying tree had found not just a magical realm, but his true purpose: to connect worlds through art, to heal divisions with creativity, to see the magic that existed everywhere for those with eyes to perceive it. Behind him, the sapling closed its portal, but only temporarily. It would open again and again, allowing Elias to move between worlds, bringing others who needed Lumeria's healing magic, and in time, bringing aspects of that magic back to a world that had forgotten it existed. And so began a new chapter, not just for Elias and Nira, not just for Earth and Lumeria, but for all those whose lives would be transformed by rediscovering the magic that had always existed in the spaces between heartbeats, in the moments between thoughts, in the thin places where reality bends just enough to let wonder slip through. For what is art, after all, but a portal to another way of seeing? And what is love but the most powerful magic of all?